Imagine for a moment that you wake up one morning, open your banking app, and discover something chilling. Although the numbers of your savings remain the same, the real-world value of that money has evaporated by half. Not because of a computer error or an individual theft, but because the pillar that supported the entire global economy has broken. For almost a century, the US dollar has been the blood running through the veins of world trade. But what happens when the planet's vital organs decide they no longer want that blood? What happens when nations stop playing with paper? What happens when they return to what has been true money for 5,000 years? We are at the threshold of the great economic divorce. Welcome to an analysis that many prefer to ignore because the truth it hides is, quite simply, seismic. We are not talking about a simple market fluctuation or a passing crisis. We are talking about phase 2 of the BRICS plan. A strategic, calculated, and lethal movement that seeks to dismantle Western hegemony, not with missiles, but with financial architecture. A system backed by the oldest and most reliable metal of humanity, gold. Today, I will present 3 fundamental axes of this potential collapse. To understand where we are going, we first must understand where we stand. What is called the exorbitant privilege. As the dollar is the world's reserve currency, the rest of the world is forced to save in dollars to be able to trade. If you want to buy oil, you need dollars. If you want to buy technology, you need dollars. This allows the US to export its inflation. It's as if you had a printer at home, and all your neighbors were forced by law to accept your printed papers in exchange for food. Do you understand the magnitude of this power? But this system, born in the ashes of World War II, had a golden rule. The dollar was backed by physical gold. Until 1971, any country could deliver their dollars and receive gold in return. But that year, President Richard Nixon broke that promise. The dollar became what we call fiat money, a currency based solely on faith and military power. Since then, the world has lived in an illusion of paper. Guess what happens next? Countries producing real resources have started to get tired of delivering tangible goods for a currency that loses value every year. And that, moreover, is used as a political weapon through sanctions. This is where the BRICS nations come in. What started as a marketing acronym has transformed into a geopolitical force representing more than 35% of world GDP, officially surpassing the G7 in purchasing power parity. But phase 1 was just expansion. Phase 2 is implementation. Phase 2 is the implementation of an alternative payment system that does not depend on New York or London. Using the dollar as a weapon of financial war sent a clear message. If your savings are in dollars, they are not really yours. They are a permission that Washington grants you and can revoke at any time. Think of the tenant and landlord analogy. The world has been the tenant, but now the biggest tenants have joined to build their own building on foundations of gold. For 5 years, central banks in China, Russia, India, and Turkey have been accumulating physical gold at a record pace. Because gold is the only financial asset that has no counterparty risk. It is no one's debt. If you have it, you have real power. Let's use an everyday example to explain this heavy concept. Imagine you live in a neighborhood. In this neighborhood, everyone uses vouchers from a specific store to buy bread. Suddenly, the store starts printing vouchers without control, devaluing their worth. And they decide that if they don't like how you dress, you can no longer use their vouchers. What would you do? You would probably start using something everyone values by itself, like small pieces of silver or even barter. To stop, depending on the capricious store. That is exactly what the BRICS are doing on a global scale. They are creating a unit of account that will be linked to a basket of commodities, with gold as the main anchor. This new system doesn't necessarily seek to destroy the dollar overnight, but to make it irrelevant for trade between nations. If Brazil wants to sell soy to China, it no longer needs to go through the US banking system. If Saudi Arabia, which recently joined the BRICS orbit, decides to accept other currencies for its oil, the petrodollar dies. Do you understand this? The petrodollar is the glue that keeps the world stuck to the dollar. Without it, the glue fails. When demand falls but supply remains massive, the value plunges. This will land in your lives in a very simple way. Everything you import will be much more expensive. Let's talk about a fascinating historical experiment. In the 1960s, French President Charles de Gaulle saw this problem coming. He called the dollar system a form of imperialism. He began sending ships loaded with dollars to the United States to demand their gold back. It was that challenge. That challenge forced Nixon to close the gold window in 1971. De Gaulle knew a system based on debt was destined to fail. What we are seeing today with the BRICS is version 2.0 of that challenge, but this time it's most of the world's population and most of the energy resources of the planet. Why is gold the perfect weapon in this scenario? financialization. Because the West has played a dangerous financial game for 40 years. We created trillions in derivatives on computer screens. We neglected heavy industry, mining, and agriculture, delegating them to the global South. The West became the world's banker, while the BRICS became the factory and the gas station. But a banker without customers and collateral is just a man. A man with an expensive suit and an empty office. By backing their new unit with gold, BRICS offers stability. They are offering something the West no longer can: stability and intrinsic value. Look at the gold market currently. Despite high interest rates in the US, which usually lower gold prices, the metal keeps breaking record highs. Why? Because it's no longer retail investors moving the price. It's the BRICS central banks absorbing every gram available. They are preparing for the impact. They are building a financial ark before the flood of debt that looms over the West. How does this affect you? It affects your retirement security, the cost of your housing, and the viability of your businesses. If the dollar loses reserve status, the US and its allies can no longer finance their lifestyles through debt. This will force brutal austerity or galloping inflation. Guess what happens next? The social structure starts to strain. Public services degrade, purchasing power erodes, and political stability vanishes. It's not a disaster prophecy. It's a mathematical consequence of living above one's means for 50 years. BRICS are creating digital infrastructures. They are building systems to move value instantly and outside the reach of the SWIFT system controlled by the West. They have developed the M-Bridge payment system and central bank digital currencies for cross-border settlements. Imagine a tunnel controlled by a guard charging a toll versus a high-speed bridge right next to it with no jurisdiction. Who wins that competition? Money is the language of trust. For a century, the world trusted the West's word. But that trust has been broken by fiscal mismanagement and the use of money as a punishment tool. Trust is gone. Society naturally seeks refuge in the tangible. The return to gold is the return to reality after a long credit binge. But there's a technical detail in Phase 2 almost no one mentions: the conversion mechanism. It's not just physical gold coins. The plan is a digital unit of account backed by commodity contracts and audited physical reserves. Sophisticated. This would allow nations like Nigeria, Indonesia, or Vietnam to trade without touching a single dollar. Elimination of risk. It is the total decentralization of monetary power, and here is where the situation becomes critical for the West. The Western financial system is built on a pyramid of debt. If the world stops buying that debt, interest rates must rise. Rise to levels that would collapse the real estate market and government finances. We are talking about a trap with no exit. If they print more money, they destroy value. If they stop, the system collapses for lack of liquidity. Economic checkmate. Do you understand the magnitude? For the first time in 500 years, the axis of power is moving back to the east. And they have the resources to make it permanent. The catalyst is already brewing in the shadows of the energy markets. That mechanism is the tokenization of real resources. Don't be intimidated by the word. Tokenizing means taking a physical asset. Imagine you have a title deed to a property, but instead of being a paper, it is a digital code you can exchange instantly. The BRICS are building a platform where nations will not exchange promises of payment, but rights over tangible assets. The rest of the world will realize it no longer needs the intermediary to acquire energy. The demand for dollars will dry up. If you are a nation in Africa or Southeast Asia and can pay for oil with a stable currency linked to gold, why use the dollar? The answer is logical. You wouldn't. And at that moment, the global demand for dollars will dry up like a historic drought. Let's talk about the analogy of the raft and the transatlantic. The West is a gigantic ocean liner with a massive leak called debt. Until now, people stayed for comfort and prestige. But when the water reaches the ankles of the first-class passengers, panic breaks out. And they see the BRICS rafts advance towards a new horizon of growth. In finance, panic is the end of liquidity. This is important because we are living through the end of the era of cheap products. Low inflation was an externalized gift. For 30 years, we externalized production to Asia. China sent us cheap goods in exchange for our printed papers. But now, BRICS nations no longer want our papers without real value. The era of ridiculous prices is over. The cost of living in Europe and America will skyrocket. It is the price of milk, gasoline, and your rent. This change is also sociological. It represents a loss of faith in the institutions and free markets of the West. It is a return to primitive trust, where we only believe in what we can touch and weigh, from credit to real assets. Guess what happens to the euro? It is an experiment even more fragile than the dollar, a victim of energy dependence. Europe doesn't have the industry of China or the oil of Arabia. History doesn't fill gas tanks or heat homes. The Triffin dilemma warned that reserve countries must run deficits, which eventually destroy trust. We are at the end of that road. Think about real versus perceived wealth. BRICS controls 70% of rare earths and most of the energy. The West controls patents. In a crisis, what do you prefer to have? The code for an app or the ownership of a copper mine? The East has the gravity. The West's response is desperation, protectionism, trade wars, and aggressive rhetoric. But gravity pulls east. Western central banks want CBDCs for control as inflation destroys the social contract. Digital debt versus physical gold. Treasury bonds are becoming junk with interest. If China and Arabia Saudita sell reserves to buy gold, interest rates must rise. No one will be able to borrow for a house, and the government must print even more just to pay interest. A vicious circle. The definition of strong is changing. Gold has outperformed almost all fiat currencies because they are evaporating. We are witnessing the end of Western arrogance. Power is taken through control of the physical reality. Humiliation versus ascent. The greatest danger is a cornered empire. History says when a reserve currency is challenged, the response is often war. BRICS are seeking absolute sovereignty. They want value that doesn't require trust. The break of the dollar monopoly. We will see a dual price system. Producers will prefer the stable gold-backed system, creating scarcity in the West. Globalization is reorganizing into two blocks. In a fight between the credit card and the food, the result is predictable. Money is stored, time and effort. If the system is bankrupt, our past is stolen and our future is in danger. Honesty in savings. How should you prepare? Diversification outside fiat and education. You cannot protect yourself from what you don't understand. Phase 2 is the death certificate of Western financial unipolarity. We are returning to the golden root of reality. The welfare map is changing. Those who produce real things will prosper. The golden order has already been born. Your safety depends on seeing through the fog of debt. Stay informed and look for the truth in the tangible. The old system is fading. Do you understand this? The era of exorbitant privilege is coming to an end. And with it, the world as we knew it. It is a moment of danger, but also of brutal clarity. Money will return to what it always should have been, a faithful reflection of reality and human effort. Not a tool for mass control and manipulation. Guess what happens if we ignore these signs? History does not forgive those who mistake illusion for reality. The phase 2 of BRICS is the most powerful reminder. In economics, as in nature, nothing is created from nothing. Value must have a root. And the BRICS have decided that this root will be golden. Are you ready to navigate this new financial sea, where old compasses no longer work? Do you understand that your security now depends on your ability? Your ability to see through the fog of debt. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and above all, look for truth. Look for the truth in what is tangible. Because in the new world that the BRICS are designing, only what is real will survive the great paper fire that is coming over the West. The choice is yours. The choice to understand this change is yours. The consequences of ignoring it will belong to everyone. Why is this important? Because your freedom, your heritage, and your future are at stake. In every ounce of gold that changes hands today in the vaults of the East, the new order has already been born. It only remains for the old system to realize that it no longer has the command. Thank you for watching. As we look towards the future, we must realize that the foundations of prosperity are being rebuilt. The integration of ancient value and modern technology is no longer a theory, it is the new reality. This shift offers a chance for individual sovereignty in a way the world hasn't seen in generations. Trade will continue, but the rules of the game have been rewritten by those who produce. A diverse basket of currencies anchored by gold provides a stability that a single debt-based currency couldn't maintain. History moves in cycles. We are ending the era of credit and beginning the era of assets. The West must now adapt or face the consequences of its own financial overreach. Innovation will shift from financial engineering to real-world technological solutions. Knowledge of these global shifts is your most powerful tool in navigating the coming years. Resilience will be found in local production and tangible community value. The security of the East's gold reserves marks the end of Western monetary dominance. The Phase 2 plan is not just about gold, it's about a total redefinition of global power. The Global South has risen, and it is here to stay, backed by the reality of resources. The sun is setting on dollar hegemony, but a new day of multipolar finance is beginning. The choice to be prepared or to be surprised is a personal one. Choose wisely. Educate yourself on the reality of assets and the illusions of debt. It is the key to your future. Hold on to what is real, for the paper illusions are destined to return to their intrinsic value. The seismic shift is happening right now, whether it is ignored or acknowledged by the mainstream. The markets are transitioning, and the smart money is moving towards the golden anchor. Connectivity is being redefined, bypassing the old hubs of power and creating new centers of wealth. Stay vigilant and keep your eyes on the tangible. The era of paper magic is ending. The new order is here. The phase 2 of the BRICS has changed the world forever. Thank you for your attention. This has been an analysis of the great economic divorce. May your future be grounded in reality. In the face of these seismic shifts, being prepared is not just a choice, it is the only rational response. Presented by Global News Agora, your source for geopolitical and military analysis. In the face of these seismic shifts, being prepared is not just a choice, it is the only rational response. A new era of global cooperation, based on real value and mutual respect, is beginning to take shape. I invite you to stay tuned as we continue to track these historical movements and their impact on your world. The golden anchor is set. The transition is inevitable. Ensure your financial future is grounded in what is real. Thank you for your trust and your time. I am your host, and this is Global News Agora. Until our next analysis,